Hi there, it's Hannah the Artisan Duck, and I'm going to show you today how I made these beautiful beaded sunflower earrings. For this pattern, I'm just using size 11 seed beads in 3 different colours, and I will list the names of these beads and the brand in the description. And I've got my beading thread, and you'd obviously need a needle, and I've put on a really long length of threads. This is about 56 inches. I always use slightly more than I think we're going to need so that I can knot my threads comfortably at the end. We're going to start with the flower centre, so we're starting off with our dark brown bead. You're going to go ahead and pick up 4 seed beads to start with. So there's my 4 beads on my needle, and I'm just going to take those down the thread, making sure that I leave a good tail thread so that I can knot that and weave it in when I have finished. So the first section, this sort of center point, is a little bit of right angle weave. So just take your needle back up through just the first bead on the thread and pull through. And you'll end up with like a little 4-pointed flower shape like so. I'm going to try and avoid knotting my thread at this point, because you could knot your thread and it will help keep the tension on the right angle weave, but I don't want to do that because we're going to be using these beads a few times as we add our petals, and I don't want any bulky knots in the way. So I'm just going to move through the bead on the edge like that, and now we're going to add on another little bit of the right angle weave. So if you don't know right angle weave, that basically means we're going to pick up 3 more beads like so, and then we're going to go back into the bead that we're exiting from on the other, sort of in the other direction like that, so that when we pull through, we have another sort of 4-petal flower like so, and it should be linked together like that. We're now going to sort of add another 2 sections of right angle weave, but underneath where we've been working. So I'm just going to go through the next bead along, trying to keep that thread tension nice and tight, and pull through. So I'll just show you, I'm exiting out the bottom. So it's just, instead of going to the top to continue onwards, we're just going to one off the side like so. Now go ahead and pick up another 3 beads, and we're going to go back into the bead that we're exiting from, but on the other direction. So again, when we pull this through, we will have another little sort of flower shape like that. Now this gets really tricky to show. We're going to add another section here. We've got 2 beads already included in this section, so we're going to be picking up less beads this time, but first we need to move our way along to this bead on the side, so we can connect those 2 together. So I'm going to go through the bead on the side here, and I will tighten that all up in a second. So just pull it, and then I'm going to go through the bead on the bottom like that and pull through, and then I'm going to go up this bead at the side. So we're still working on that same little section there, but it's this one at the side, and pull through. Right, because this bead at the bottom here is part of this bit of right angle weave, I'm going to take my needle through there as well, just to join those 2 beads together like so. And you can just go in and sort of tighten those threads if it's coming apart a little bit, and pull through. So now we've already got 2 of the petals in our next section of right angle weave. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick up 2 more beads, and we're going to go back up, so not quite the same one that we exited from, but it's the one at the side that we sort of moved around to originally, and pull up. And again, just go in, pull all that thread nice and tight before you finish it. Don't forget, you're holding that tail thread nice and tight in your hands as well. So you should have something now that looks roughly like this. So if we just take a look at it for a second, we've got 2 beads together in like a little section, and then a gap sort of where they're not joined up. So you can just see there like that. We're going to go ahead and fill these little gaps. So I'm just going to move my needle up so we can access that top. I'm going to go into the bead. So we're exiting out of this side bead here. We're not making any new bead paths. We're just following the path that we already have and going in there. I'm going to go up and into these 2 beads here. So this, if you imagine a 4-petaled flower, this is going through 2 of the petals in that flower. And I'm just making sure that thread is nice and tight and pulling through. And we're now going to fill the gaps. So I'm just going to pick up one of my brown beads and take my needle through the next 2 brown beads along, and you'll see that when I pull that through, that bead sort of fills the gap between those 2 sections and pulls it together. So we're going to add another bead here to join these ones up. So just go ahead and pick up one bead and go through the next 2 brown beads along. And pull. And you'll see it just helps to pull those sections together. So I'm going to add another one here. So I've got my single bead. I'm going to go into the next 2. Like so, and pull together. And then, oops, I'm just pulling it a bit too tight. You can see we've got one more gap to fill there. So I'm just going to go ahead, pick up another bead, and I'm going to take my needle into the next 2 beads along again and pull through. So you should now have something that looks like that, and we're going to ignore that rogue purple bead that I've got in my beadwork, but we're now going to add the domed centre to the flower. You could do this without doing this bit, but I do think adding that dome really helps give it dimension and gives the flower some structure. So go ahead and pick up 3 more of your brown beads, and you're exiting out of sort of this bead here. We're going to miss the next bead along out and then go into the next bead along, and we'll take it through the next one as well. So we're going to go into this bead and then essentially miss this one out. But just take those through. And basically what we've done is add another little point onto there. And we're going to do that 3 more times. So pick up another 3 beads. You're going to miss this next bead out because we're coming out of this one here. We're going to take our needle into the next one along and the next one after that as well. So 2 beads and pull through. And just give them a wiggle if they don't sit right, but essentially you need to add it like a little hat onto the sort of the bead that we've jumped over. So pick up 3 more beads. You're going to jump over the next bead along and straight into the next 2 beads along and pull through. Right, and for the last time, we're going to pick up another 3. We're going to miss the next bead along out, and we're going to go into the next 2 beads along. Right, so it should look a little bit like this now. It doesn't look very uniform, but it will all pull together. We now need to connect these 4 sort of corners of our square, so to speak, together. So we're exiting out of this sort of 3rd bead down here. We're going to take our needle up to the top so that we're exiting out that bead at the middle of that point there and pull through. Now you're going to take your needle, you're just going to go straight into the points on the other 3 beads and pull. That's the first one. I'm going to go into the next one. And then the next one again. And then we're going to go back into the first one that we exited from. Now I need to pull the thread and lift these sections up so that when you pull, it draws those 4 beads together in the center, and you end up with this sort of 3D beaded shape. I'm going to take my needle through all of those beads again to reinforce it, because obviously by pulling it quite tight, it's going to take quite a lot of the tension in the beadwork. So just work my way through again and then make sure it's all nice and tight. Now we're going to start working on the petals. So before I swap over my beads, I'm just going to take my needle down through this beadwork so we're exiting out for the first petal. You can see this is the bead I'm exiting out of at the top, and I've got another bead just below it here. So I'm going to take my needle into there and pull through. And now I'm going to jump my needle down into the next bead, sort of, if you imagine this as being 3 rows high, this is the bottom row of beads, and just pull through. I'm not making any new bead paths as such. I'm just sort of going through the next logical bead along. And there we go. So to start your petal, go ahead and pick up 8 of your seed beads and take them down the thread. You're going to take your needle now down through the 3rd bead at the top there. So you're going to leave the top 2 beads completely untouched and pull your needle and thread down. You're going to have to work at keeping the tension now in the thread, because you don't want them loose against the center of the flower. So you're going to need to make sure that you do tighten this up as best as you can. I often find that if you hold the top beads and then pull, it'll help tighten it all up. And you can go back in throughout the course of this and just make sure that it's all nice and tight. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up another single seed bead, and we're going to do a little bit of peyote stitch. So we're going to miss out the next bead along. So we're exiting out of this one. We're going to skip the next bead along, and then we're going to go into the bead after that and pull through. So when you pull the beads tight, it should look like that. So I'm just going to go ahead now and pick up another single seed bead. And again, we're going to miss a bead out. So we're exiting out of this bead here. We're going to miss this one out, and we are going to go into the next one along and pull. So we got a whole sort of little section of those staggered beads. We're now going to pick up one more of our seed beads. This finishes off the first part of the petal. So we are exiting out of this brown seed bead here, but we're exiting out on that direction. So we're going to take our needle with that single seed bead on it in through the opposite direction and pull. And at this point, if your thread is at all loose, just make sure you go back in and tighten it. You now have that little section of peyote stemming off from a single brown bead on the flower centre. To add more detail and stability to this petal, we're going to take the needle back up through that sort of first seed bead here and pull through. And we are basically just doing a little bit of peyote stitch again. So we're going to pick up, a single seed bead, and we're going to take our needle into that next bead along that is sticking out. You'll see, and I'll show you more clearly the next time around. So if you're not familiar with peyote, you'll see we're just basically filling in the gaps up the side here. So I'm going to pick up another single bead. So we're exiting out of this bead here. We're going to jump over to the next bead that's sticking up on the row and pull through. Like so. And then we're going to add another one to finish this row off. So I've got my single bead. I'm going to go back in through the top and pull through, and that finishes that side off. So we're going to continue by picking up another single seed bead, and we're going to take our needle down into the bead on the top, so on the other row side of the petal, and pull down. And now we're just going to fill the gaps in just like we did on the first side, up all the way down. So pick up a single bead. We're going to ignore that bead down there and go through the next bead that's sticking up on the side. We're going to pick up another seed bead, and again we're going to go through the yellow bead that's sticking up, so the next one along and down. Like so. We just got one more to do in this row. So pick up a single bead, we're going to take it through this yellow bead at the bottom and pull through. And that's our first petal done. So we're going to go back through the brown bead that we started from. Might be easier if I turn this around so I can show you. So we're going to go through the brown bead that we started from, like so. And then we're going to go through two more beads around. So just the natural sort of line of the thread and pull through. And now we're ready to add the next petal. And you'd have to miss this bead out in the middle each time, because when we add the second row of petals, you're going to attach it to the beads that we have skipped. So I shall just turn it back round again. I will do another petal with you, and then I'll go off and finish the remaining ones on this row. And then I'll come back to you after that for the next step, but we'll just do this one together again. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up 8 seed beads. So there's my 8 beads, and we're going to just take them down the thread. Now we're going to miss the 2 beads out at the top and take our needle into the 3rd bead down, like so, and pull through. You need those 2 beads to sit side by side on the top, like that. I've picked up another single bead, and I'm going to take my needle. We're going to skip the next yellow bead along and go into the one after that and pull through. So they sit side by side like that. I'm going to pick up another single seed bead. We're going to miss the next one along out, and we're going to go into the one after that and pull through. Now to finish this first section off, I'm going to pick up another single bead, and I'm just going to take the needle into the brown bead that we started from. We're exiting out of this side, so we're sort of looping back round and going in from the opposite direction and pull through. And there is the first part of that petal complete. So we're going to take our needle up into that bead at the bottom and pull through. And we're now going to fill those gaps in as we go up and around our petal shape. I've just turned my beading around a little bit to make it easier for me. So I've picked up a single seed bead, and I'm going to take my needle up into the next yellow bead that's sticking up and pull through so that it fills the gap, and we're going to do that all the way up until we reach the top. So pick up another single bead and pull through. We're going to go ahead and pick up another one and go in through the bead at the top. So you should have something that looks like that. So I've picked up another single bead. I'm just going to go in through this bead at the top alongside and pull through. I can see a thread, little bit of dust there. Pull that through and down. And now we're just going to fill these gaps in on the other side. So pick up a single bead and through and down. Pick up another single bead. We're going to go through the next yellow that's sticking up on this side, like so. And then, oops, another yellow bead. I'm going to go into the bottom bead there and pull through. And now we're going to go through the brown that we have sort of anchored this whole petal on and pull through. You can see by going back through that, it really makes that petal sit exactly where we need it to be. We're going to go through the next brown bead along and the one after that, so 2 brown beads, pull through, and now you're ready to start all over again. You should have 6 yellow petals in total when you're done. I'm going to go away and do that, and then I shall come back and join you for the next bit. So I've just finished off the last petal, and I'm just taking the needle through that brown bead again that the petal is anchored on. So I'm just going to pull that through, and now because the petals are sort of loose and they haven't got much stability to them, we're just going to add a little bead to connect them all together, and it will help give a little bit of structure. So I'm just going to go up through that bottom bead again. So I'm just going to go up through that bead there and pull through. And then I'm going to go up through the next bead along on the outer edge. Just move that out of the way so you can see where I'm going. So it's just this next bead along on the outer edge of my petal and pull through. Like that. I'm going to go ahead and pick up just a single bead, like that, and we're coming out through the top of that bead, so we're going to find the matching bead on the other side. So it's the second one up from the bottom, and you're going to go down through the top towards the middle of the flower and pull. And it's just going to pull those two petals together, and once it's all done, it adds like a little detail anyway, which looks really pretty. So we're going to go down through the next bead so we can move our way along to add the next one. We're going to go through the brown bead that petal is anchored on, through, and then we're going to go back up through the next two beads on the other side like that and pull through. Now we're going to pick up another single bead. We're going to find that second yellow bead on the other side and go down. It's already gone into the yellow one below that as well. That's fine. And pull through. We're going to go through the brown bead at the bottom and go through, and it's just the brown bead that the petal is sort of linked to. There's no other beads. And pull, and then we're going to go back up into the bottom bead on the other side and the second bead up, and I'm just going to repeat that all the way around until all the petals are linked together. So I've added the final sort of connecting bead, and I'm just about to go through the brown bead that the petal is linked to like that and pull through. I'm just going to take my needle through this sort of gap in the beadwork here so that it's facing the back of the beading, because we're going to add our gold petals behind. So I'm going to move my needle into the next brown bead along, and it doesn't have a petal anchored onto it. So that's the one that we're going to use for our gold. So pull that through, and I shall get the beads out for the next bit. So the gold petals are formed the exact same way as the yellow. So I've gone ahead and picked up 8 of my gold on my needle and pull down. I'm going to take my needle back down through the third seed bead. Going to pick up another single bead. We're going to jump over the next one along and go into the one after that and pull through. I've picked up another single gold bead. We're going to jump over the next one along into the one after that and pull through. So I've picked up another single bead, and we're going to take it into the brown that we exited from, but from the other side. There we go. Now we're ready to add the beads that fill the gaps in at the side and on the top. So I'm going to take my needle up through that bottom gold bead and pull through. I'm going to go ahead and pick up another single bead and fill in that gap by going into the next one, sort of that's sticking out, waiting, like that. I'm going to pick up another one and go into the next gold bead there and pull through. I'm going to pick up another gold bead and take it in to the top bead. Like so. And then I'm going to pick up a single bead to add the detail to the top of the petal. So we're going to go into that top bead on the other side and pull down. And now we're going to fill in on the other side. So I'm picking up a single bead. We're going to take it into the next one along and pull through. another one, and it's that bead sticking out there, and pull through. And then the last bead to finish it off at the bottom there. Like so. So just like before, I'm going to go in through the brown bead that whole petal is anchored onto and pull through. And then we're going to go through the next brown along, and that will be where the yellow is attached to the yellow petal. So we're going to go through that and into the next brown along. So I've done both of those at the same time. So the next brown along is a free one. There's no petal on that one yet. And pull through. And now you're ready to add another gold petal. And when you turn it over, you can see that that gold is sitting between the yellow ones. So because it's the same stitch, again, I won't repeat it for you. I shall go away and bead that and come back when it's done. So I finished all those petals off, and I've just exited out the brown bead at the base of this petal. So like before, we need to connect them together so they have a little bit more stability. So I'm just going to take my needle up through the bottom bead here, and I'm going to work my way up through the outside until I meet this bead that's sticking out in the middle. So just pull through. And then I'm going to go up through that one, and I'm going into this next one up as well. I'm hoping you can see that. Shiny beads make it harder to see, I think, but they are really pretty. So I'm just going to pull that up there, and then I'm going to take my needle into this bead that's sticking out at the side. And now I'm going to pick up some more beads. So I've picked up 3 more of my gold beads, and we are going to find the matching bead on the other side, so the other petal. So it's this middle one here. So because we're coming out the top of this bead here, we're going to go into the gold bead at the side, going down towards the center of the flower. So whereas before we only picked up 1 bead, we're picking up 3 here because the gap is slightly bigger because we're coming higher up the petal. So we now need to move across, and I don't want to keep going through these brown beads now because we've gone through those quite a lot. So I'm just going to work my way down this petal here, and I'm going to go down another bead again. And then I'm going to cut across. So we're just going up into that middle bead towards the bottom. And then I'm going to go into the next one up. So it's just below the bead we're aiming for. And pull. And then we're going to go through that middle bead that we're going to connect onto the next petal. I'm hoping the lighting is good enough because it's just started to pour outside. My room has suddenly got very dark indeed. So I'm hoping you can see what it is that I'm doing. So it's like that. I'm going to go ahead and pick up 3 more beads. So there's my 3 beads that I've just picked up. I'm exiting out at the top here, so we're going to take the needle down into that middle bead on the next petal along and pull. And as you tighten this, the beading is going to want to start pulling backwards. Push it forwards so that when you turn it round, it sort of domes towards the centre. and you'll have a lovely sort of flower shape when the beading's facing the right way around. So I'm just going to get my tail thread out the way. That's my working thread there. So I'm going to go down again through that petal and pull through. I'm now cutting across into the middle there and up. And then I'm going to go up the next bead along, moving towards where we need to exit for the next connection, and pull up. And then we're going to go through that gold bead at the side, like so. And you're just going to pick up 3 more beads and continue that all the way around. I shall come back to you when I have done that. There we go. So I've done all that, and I'm really making sure that that thread is nice and tight, because I want to add mine onto an earring and I don't have any jump rings small enough to fit through the top. I'm now just going to take my needle back up to the top and add a little loop of beads. So I've come down, I'm exiting out of this bead here. I'm just going to move my way up like I did before, but instead of stopping at the side, we're going to go all the way to that top bead, like so. So I'm just going through that top bead, and I'm just going to pick up 3 seed beads, like so. And I'm going to go back into that top bead again, but on the other side, so it forms a loop. And that'll be what I use to attach it to my earring hook. And I'm just going to go through those again just to reinforce them. And then I'm going to go through that bottom bead again, and I'll tighten up all that beadwork as I do it, like so. And now I'm just ready to tie my knots and cut off my threads. So what I will do is the working thread that I've currently got, I will tie my knots in the gold beadwork, and this other thread I will tie either in the brown beadwork or in the yellow petals. So if you are unsure how to tie your knots, you're simply going to take your needle back down into your beadwork, like so. My thread is getting very short now, so you definitely need 56 inches to start with, or a little bit more. You're going to take your needle under where you know there is some thread. So you can see my needle is going under the thread that runs between the gold beads here. I'm going to pull that through and make a loop of thread here. I'm going to take my needle through the loop and pull. So when you pull that thread, it'll form a knot around the threads running through the beadwork. You then just take your needle down into the beads again and pull that knot to hide it in the beads. You do that a few times. Don't just do it once. Do it a good number of times through the beadwork. Weave in as much of that thread as you can, and then you are ready to cut it off and do your tail thread the exact same way. I hope you've enjoyed that tutorial. If you have, please give me a like, a follow, a comment, whatever you feel inclined to do, but anything helps. As I said, all the descriptions of the beads and the threads will be in the sort of description blocks below. But yeah, you should now have a beautiful pair of sunflower earrings.